going to talk today about leaf and consumer behaviour. I'll structure it in that I'll introduce very broadly what leaf does, and then I'll run through the different elements of our organisation and how we achieve our main mission and aims. And then for each of the activities that we do to achieve this, I'll discuss and how they relate to influencing consumer behaviour. And then finally, I'll round up with talking about how we plan to move forward and also in the current challenges that we're facing, what our strategy is. So Leaf's mission, it's difficult to summarise in a single sentence what Leaf is trying to achieve and what we're doing. Our tagline is that we're the leading organisation delivering more sustainable food and farming. I completely appreciate that from that single sentence, it's quite vague and it's also a very big statement. So if it's not clear at this point what we do, don't worry, I'll discuss it in more detail. One thing to highlight is that we're delivering more sustainable food and farming, and the only way that we're going to do that is by engaging with all actors there along the food supply chain. So we work with farmers, we work with food industry, scientists and consumers because we need their engagement, their influence in order for us to achieve our goal. We're a membership organisation, so our funding comes from members who join to support the charity, but also fundraising. So, for example, some retailers, they work with us to meet their corporate social responsibility, and that's another way that we engage with the industry. But really, we need all of these contact points along the food industry to have the impact that we have. And it works towards our vision, which is that a world is farming, eating, and living sustainably. So it wouldn't be appropriate for us just to focus on the producers or just the consumers, for example. I also want to just spend a bit of time talking about what sustainability means to us as an organisation. Sustainability is a word that is used profusely through any sort of marketing and any sort of communication, increasingly so in the last few years. So it's really important to us that we're very clear what we mean when we say sustainable and what we're actually working towards. So when we talk about sustainability, what we work on is the basis of integrated farm management. So this is a whole farm business approach that delivers more sustainable farming. We're not saying there is one right way of doing things. And we have worked with this framework, which you can see on the screens of the IFM wheel. And we recognise that nothing in farming acts in isolation. If a farmer is doing something to improve their soil, that's going to have impacts on their water management and their energy efficiency. Or if someone is managing their farm to promote the landscape and promote the biodiversity there, that's going to have impacts on crop health and protection. So it's only by considering all of these elements and how they interact that a business can really come to a sustainable solution. And this means that it includes all three aspects of sustainability also. So because we don't dictate what one right thing is right, it means that the business can identify the sustainable solution that is appropriate to the environmental context, that's appropriate to the resources they have available to them. So if it's not economically, financially viable, then that equally isn't a sustainable solution. And finally, we do have an element of integrated farm management that is purely based on community engagement. We do often get asked why we've included this in integrated farm management because it's not a direct action. But if there isn't that engagement with the local community, it needs that social sustainability in order for it to work. So that's why it's there and that's why it's so important. So integrated farm management is a whole farm approach. It's site specific and we really do focus on continuous improvement. We recognise that with sustainability, often the most ideal sustainability solution would take a very long time to achieve. And that's not always possible and things might change. And that's why it's really important to have that goal in the mind, but it's not the only important thing. And there's small changes that can be made along the way. So through our integrated farm management, it's really encouraged that businesses constantly, well, not constantly, but regularly evaluate their performance and evaluate their goals to see where they're heading. So that's what we mean by sustainability, and it really does underpin everything that we do here at Leaf. So I mentioned that Leaf's mission is to enable more sustainable food and farming, and we do this by three pillars, core pillars of activity. So the first is facilitating sustainable farming knowledge generation and exchange. The second pillar is developing market opportunities. The third pillar is engaging the public in sustainable food and farming. Whilst these are three distinct pillars, they all do interact with each other. So there is some crossover, but primarily this is the way that we work and how we structure our kind of activities to achieve our mission. I'll start off with talking about the Leaf Network. So this is a core element where we're facilitating sustainable farming knowledge generation and exchange. One of the most important elements of this for us is the Leaf demonstration farms. We recognise that peer-to-peer learning is the most impactful way that behavioural change can take place. And we really wanted to tap into that and work with a range of farmers that could form a network across the UK to enable that to happen. So we currently have 38 demonstration farms in the UK. They are all working farms and they are all implementing integrated farm management. And they are there to demonstrate best practice in integrated farm management and share learnings with peers. And it doesn't have to be other farming colleagues, it can be people from the industry, it can be interested education bodies, it's anyone who has can learn something from visiting a farm and really accessing their local expertise. So it's promoting sustainable farming practices, and it's a really valuable resource. And we hear some lovely stories about how we'll have a horticultural business who will go visit an arable business. And whilst their outputs and their main strategies can be very different, they will share learnings and they'll benefit from that peer-to-peer learning because they've got the commonality of integrated farm management and the interest in sustainability. Another aspect of the Leaf network is innovation centres. So we're promoting best practice integrated farm management, but we want to make sure that what we're communicating is evidence-based and it's research-led. So we need to work with relevant research bodies or industry to make sure that we're at the forefront of that knowledge. So there's 11 innovation centres that make sure that what we're communicating is appropriate and it's really always pushing forward the development of integrated farm management. Leaf Network isn't just about working with farmers and with industry, we also have a European-wide research basis. So we're engaged in a variety of Horizon 2020 projects. So these can be any projects not directly relating to integrated farm management, but are helping to spread the word about sustainable farming practices. We often get other organisations and other research projects wanting to engage with us because we have that really valuable resource of the demonstration farms that is quite rare. And also we can learn from their learning. So we've recently engaged in projects about intercropping and diversification that have really informed what we're communicating. The last element of the Leaf network is the technical training and events. So usually at this time of year, we will be gearing out to go out on farm and run a wide range of trainings, and we are adapting and we are running much more online events. But what we want to do is share our knowledge, and we want to also allow people to meet others. We want to facilitate networking, because when someone attends one of our events, they don't get value just from what we deliver and the content. They also get value from meeting the other people who are there and learning from their experiences. So whilst we're slightly scuppered in what we can do, we are working to adapt, and we're still hosting things online. And as soon as kind of restrictions are lifted, we will be out there as soon as possible to try and get back in the field and train people. So that's a summary of what the Leaf network is, and now I just want to talk about the influence that it will have. It's not always, I think, directly evident how we impact consumers or the public, and we are mostly farmer focused. That's who our main communications and our main audience is, but we do have an indirect influence on consumers. One key way that we indirectly influence consumers is that we provide businesses with the skills to communicate effectively. So almost all farming businesses will have a very strong need and a value in communicating with the public or with consumers. This could be to promote their product, or it could be to promote what they're doing. It could be to help get that support for farming practices in general, but also more sustainable farming practices. So businesses have this really good intention and the value from communicating, but often they struggle, and it is very hard to do in a positive and effective way. So we recognise that need for training on this, and we've devised Speak Out training. So this is a session that we deliver in person, but we've also developed the Speak Out toolkit, which is the screenshot on the screen. And it essentially goes through different elements of how a business can communicate more effectively. So that could be anything from simple things like taking a good photo to use on social media, to how to prepare for an interview or how to set up a Twitter feed. And also kind of the more challenging things like how to answer difficult questions. That's something we get a lot, especially I think in terms of whenever there's any media coverage of farming issues, it can tend towards the more negative perception. So being able to answer a question in a positive way and without kind of passing blame is a really good skill to have. So we won that training and we've had really positive feedback from that. And it's giving that business the skill to communicate and really spread their message and hopefully influence behaviour in some respect. And whilst we recognise that farmer to farming and peer-to-peer learning is really important, we also recognise that word of mouth is incredibly influential. So if a business is communicating, it doesn't have to be on a very wide scale. That could be with their local community, it could be with their neighbours, or just on their social media. But that has a very positive influence if they're doing it effectively. And they might not be communicating about a project. It might not be communicating about all the work that we do at Leaf, even though we would love them to do that, obviously. But they might not do that. But it's still working towards our mission. It's still promoting integrated farm management, and it's still getting people to appreciate what sustainability really means and what that can look like. And this is goes on to my second point of we're giving businesses the framework of integrated farm management to communicate their message. I think what's really evident in kind of marketing of things is that people want a one simple answer to sustainability. They want one thing they can do that will have an impact. And actually, it's much more complex than that. But that's very hard to communicate. We're essentially saying that complexity is the answer. I can't tell you one right thing of doing things. And that's not what somebody wants to hear, essentially. So the framework of integrated farm management is actually a nice little package that we can communicate that. And we're not selling one thing. We're not selling a single solution. We are selling and we're promoting a mindset, and we're promoting a framework that somebody can use to be able to make more informed decisions. And it can make them appreciative of the trade-offs, and it can make them recognise the complexities that have in place. And this is really important. If someone can communicate that, then it can have a really big impact on a variety of things. So it can impact what they buy if they can understand what is sustainability and the various trade-offs they have. But it can also go to a more kind of word of mouth level. So I kind of remember from, I think, 2017 and the courgette crisis, where there were no courgettes on the supermarket shelves, and I overheard numerous conversations of absolute outrage of how this was awful that there was no courgettes on the shelves. But if someone has already understood how much work goes into producing a courgette and all of the trade-offs that that has, and how it's also dependent on the weather and the unpredictability of that, if that could have been communicated to them in a positive way in a conversation prior to that, that can be very influential, and that can make that neighbour say to another neighbour, oh, I don't actually think it's so bad that the courgettes aren't on the shelves. So it can be a more personal influence that it has. But again, it's just communicating that complexity, communicating the message. Well, just think about the trade-offs, think about the variety of actors at play here. And the combination of that can create a more realistic expectation of sustainability. And that's incredibly valuable, because if there's that realistic expectation, that facilitates the other actors in the system, such as retailers, being able to meet that expectation and not trying to meet something that is unrealistic to achieve. So whilst the framework of integrated farm management may seem quite a simple thing to communicate, the impact of that on a wider scale, if that's incorporated into people's mindsets, can be incredibly beneficial. And we want to equip businesses with the skills, and even just with that simple framework, for them to be able to do that. Another element that we're supporting businesses is a positive story. We don't want to be an organisation that's saying that is wrong, you cannot do that, or ever kind of criticising another business for doing something wrong. We want things to be positive, and that's what we encourage, and we provide this community to do that. And that does enable a personal connection, that enables a kind of a more influential. I don't think anyone really responds very well to being told what to do. So instead, I think it's more better that we say this is good and look how great this is, and you could support that if you wanted to. Another aspect of Leaf Network is that we recognise that we are not the experts in everything. We are experts in integrated farm management, but we need to work with others to get our influence and to have the biggest impact that we can. So even if we're working with somebody that has shared values, that can have a greater influence on people getting our message out there, which is ultimately what we're trying to do. So that's another key element of our work with the Leaf Network. So I'll move on to Leaf Mark certification. As I mentioned at the start, this is the aspect of Leaf that I work with and I'm involved in. And Leaf Mark certification is an environmental assurance system that recognises more sustainable farming. So Leaf Mark certified businesses have met the requirements of the Leaf Mark standard, which is a document that's aligned with the principles of integrated farm management. It was quite hard when we were developing that to get this, a wheel and get that into a linear document, but by linking different sections to each other, we have been able to do that. And it's so important that businesses can get recognition for the sustainable practices that they're doing, and they are eligible to do that by putting the Leaf Mark logo on their packaging if they meet the requirements of the standard. It implements the principles of integrated farm management, so as you would expect, it's got a whole farm approach and it's plan-based. So we do differ slightly from other certification systems here. So just take an example of Red Tractor, they have an arable module and they have a dairy module, whereas for Leaf Mark, the entirety of a business's enterprises are included within the certification. And that means that they can consider that whole juggling act of the whole farm and all of the trade-offs that are there in terms of thinking about sustainability. And the Leaf Mark standard is also plan-based, and this enables us not to dictate a single practice of what's right or wrong, but instead enables the business to recognise what is right in their context. So just as an example, they need to have a water management plan where they think of efficiency, they do appropriate monitoring, and they're setting targets. We are a global system that's enabled again by the framework of integrated farm management and expectability. And really importantly for us is that we are a robust and credible certification system. There are over 400 voluntary sustainability systems out there, and I think absolutely the market is at saturation point in terms of how many logos can be on there and really how many are understood. I think I would definitely question that. So we want to stand out, we want to be deserving of our position in the marketplace. And to do this and to evidence that we've done this, we are one of 22 full members of the ICL Alliance. So the ICL Alliance is essentially our standard setters. They set out 3 codes for assurance, for standard setting, and for impact monitoring. And we have to meet those requirements in order to be a full member. It's not easy for us to do, but we absolutely see the value and we want to do it, because it means that if we make a claim about how many percentages of leaf mark certified produce is out there, if we're claiming anything, we absolutely have the evidence to back that up. And it underpins our whole organisation. So for the standard setting process, we are entirely transparent about how we develop the standard. We engage with stakeholders throughout the whole process. And even in the assurance process, so all of the certification bodies, their performance is monitored on an annual basis. They have to meet certain ISO 17065 regulatory requirements, and all certification decisions are independent. So I could go on and I won't, but essentially we do our work well and we're very proud of that. And that also means that we are deserving of consumer trust. If anybody asks us to evidence anything, we will absolutely immediately have something to back up what we're saying. And that's so important. If anybody's questioning, we want people to be able to trust what we do and what we deliver. So the impact on behaviour is a bit clearer cut, I think, for Leaf Mark than perhaps for the Leaf network, in that there is that direct impact where if a Leaf Mark logo is displayed on packaging, then that will enable an informed decision and enable somebody to buy something based on its sustainability credentials. That in itself will then have support in the industry, and it helps drive forward this mission that we're trying to achieve. Where we can go further than that is where we can work with a retailer. One example that's been really important for us since the start of Leaf Mark has been working with Waitrose. So Waitrose have a requirement on all of their UK fresh produce to be sourced from Leaf Mark certified farms. So that means that we're not only getting a wider distribution of Leaf Mark certified businesses and creating that demand from the retailer end, but it also means that we're engaging with their communications and their marketing strategies. So I'm just going to show a quick video, so I'll change my screen around. But a couple of years ago, Waitrose released an advertising campaign for Leaf Mark certified projects that was really, really well received, and I just wanted to share that with you now. So we thought that was a really lovely campaign. So a really fantastic campaign for us to be involved with, and having a wider impact than we could have had. So that was first shown, I think, after Great British Bake Off a couple of years ago, where everybody's thinking about cake. So it was great for us. We're getting our message out there in a positive way, also talking about the environment and helping promote that recognition of the Leaf Mark logo. So I'll touch on here, it is important to recognise that we do realise and appreciate that recognition of the Leaf Mark logo isn't particularly high. And we work with that, because whilst we would love everybody to know what the logo means and what that stands for, that's not the reality. And we work very hard to get some communications out there. But it's also important for us to say, okay, well, if that's not our main marketing strategy, there are things that we can do. So we work and we utilise the consumer demand for sustainability. So it really goes hand in hand with Leaf Mark that by having the logo on pack, we are enabling informed decisions and we can help create a demand. But equally, we need consumer interest in sustainability in order to get retailers to appreciate the work that we're doing. So it's really circular, and we do depend on that. And one thing that's a bit different about Leaf Mark is that it's a white label. So a lot of products can be sold and they might not be sold with the Leaf Mark logo on. And that enables us to still work with retailers and get our impact. but also enables the product to get out there. So as an example of this, M&S have their Plan A attributes, and for fruit and vegetables, Leaf Mark certification is a compulsory Plan A attribute to supply them. So whilst it's not on packaging, whilst it's not on the logo, it isn't used, it's an internal sourcing requirement. And that's enabled by the consumer demand. And with retailers, they're a really interesting bunch to work with. And a lot of it revolves around kind of consumer expectations of that retailer. So one of the reasons we've been, so well linked with Waitrose is that, consumers do have that expectation of Waitrose to be working hard with the environment, to be doing good things. And equally with M&S, there is that very high consumer expectation for that retailer to be doing those certain things. And what's interesting is the different strategies that these retailers have taken. So Waitrose are using the logo on pack, whereas M&S aren't using the logo, but they still have it as an internal sourcing requirement. So it's two different methods, two different impacts, but that was dependent on the retailer being able to evidence what their consumers expected of them. And when these consumers and when the retailers do this, other retailers follow. So we are now increasingly getting interest from other not such high-end retailers who want to be able to kind of step up their mark and meet that. So having that consumer demand for sustainability really facilitates Leaf Mark to expand and have a greater impact, be that whether it is a logo or if it is just that expectation on consumers and how they're actually going to demonstrate that impact. So that's something we're working forward. We really want to build our relationship with retailers and try and get that going. But yeah, it's really exciting time for us. Sustainability is increasingly on the agenda, increasingly with corporate social responsibility. So even if it is a tick box for a retailer to say, okay, yeah, we're meeting environmental requirements, it's absolutely not a tick box exercise for us. We really want to do what we're doing, and it's not a tick box exercise for the consumer either. So we're having that positive impact. The last kind of core of Leaf was engaging the public in sustainable food and farming. There's two strategies that we achieve this, the first being Leaf Education and the second being Leaf Open Farm Sunday. So Leaf Education, it's a really exciting thing to be working on, and I think to embed agriculture into the curriculum. So it's not just about having a GCSE, it's about in maths lessons, are they giving an example in an agricultural context? It's really incorporating it throughout. And it's not just focusing on school children of a younger age, which is where previously the focus has been. It's also about communicating it at the older children, young adults, because they are equally important and they can sometimes make more impactful decisions at that age if they're buying their own food or if they're thinking about career options. So we embed it into the curriculum and we work with a range of regional education coordinators. We provide training to teachers to facilitate them to be able to do this. And it's really about having positive debates on complex issues that can be very challenging to discuss, but getting in there at an early age and having a positive influence on the next generation. With slightly differently with Leaf Education is that they focus on the entire food system. So whereas previously with Leaf Mark, it's more focused on farmers and focused on consumer end, and with the Leaf Network, it's definitely focused on farmers. Leaf Education covers production, but it also incorporates manufacturing and distribution, trade, nutrition, kind of social reasons about wanting to choose the food you eat and what that means on a social level. So it really is the whole story that I think is so important to tie that all together. And they also have a couple of nice initiatives. So one being example of it's Farmer Time. So I've forgotten the name and written FaceTime a Farmer on the slide, but it has changed to Farmer Time. But that was essentially where they would link up a school with a farmer, and that had a weekly call or a 2-weekly call where the kids could ring in and speak to that farmer on a regular basis. So really being able to demonstrate the farm throughout the year and we had such positive stories from it, and also reports of children asking all of the very difficult questions that adults are too diplomatic to ask. So quite a challenge for the farmers involved, but really valuable for all parties. The other aspect of public engagement is Leaf Open Farm Sunday. So this is kind of our tagline, is that it's the farming community's annual opening day, where a farm will open up to the general public to really help build that recognition and understanding of what farming is. Unfortunately, this year, as you can imagine, we've had to postpone that event. So that's scheduled for later in the year, fingers crossed, all things going well. But we are looking to do more virtual equivalents anyway. But it's such a valuable day. We get such positive feedback from it, in that, you know, someone can go to the farm for the first time, they can see an animal for the first time and really link up where that information comes from. I think we heard about a study where children thought that chocolate milk came from a different variety of cow, and you know, it's things like that that you can actually be able to address by going on from farm and seeing that cows and that it's just milk. So you know, it's a really positive thing. And the events can be any size. It can be a very small farm just opening up to their local community, or it can be a full-on massive event where they have like trade shows, and they have tractor trailer rides, and they have welly throwing and things like that. So it's really varied and diverse, and it really just wants to engage as many people as we possibly can. So with the influence of that on behaviour, it's again tapping into that informed decision and positive messaging. So it's a really useful opportunity actually to be able to challenge misconceptions and change perceptions about things, because if you're having a conversation with somebody, if you're debating something, that can be far more influential and far more constructive than someone telling you what is right or what is wrong, or just by seeing a statistic on TV. These are people's stories, these are people's lives, and that really gets buy-in from the consumers and from people. We're raising awareness of what a farm actually looks like in real life, and I think for people to have gone onto a farm, that means a lot more to them and is a lot more influential and long lasting than kind of an online equivalent of that. We're sharing stories, we're also building relationships. We hear nice stories of where someone's gone to a farm and then they want to support that farm in the future because they saw how hard that person was working, they saw the value in what they were doing. So it's that kind of really personal relationships, you know, tapping into the impact and the benefit of that, that it can have, and challenging perceptions and having these positive conversations. And it also does engage with the kind of whole food system. So a lot of the, for example, dairy farms they also have a kind of processing factory there, and seeing that whole tie in, it really makes someone think about, okay, yeah, this is the process that food goes through to get to, and just awareness of that is so important if people are going to be talking about this and you know, speaking about it responsibly. So I've talked about what Leaf does and where we impact, and just to finish up here, where next? So for us, I think in terms of looking at where we can have our greatest influence and where we can expand our impact, that will always be collaborating with others where we can, be that with more farmer members or more kind of retailers, but often other organisations who have similar missions and similar drives. There's a lot of organisations reinventing the wheel, and I would much rather we just all work together and try and get our shared messages out there where we can, because that will be more impactful. And with coronavirus, so it's been fascinating and horrific in equal measures to observe the impact in this, and there has been unprecedented changes in behaviour in the last month. I think, you know, more change in a month than there has been in years and years. And whilst I think it would be very hard to predict what the long-lasting impact of that is, and what changes stay and what changes are, you know, short-term, for us, we recognise that there is actually a bit more support for British farming at the moment. There's, even though businesses themselves are financially challenged, or they're under incredibly high pressures to meet demands, and also consumers are often financially, this is very hard times, but there is still that public support, and there's outreach when there's, not kind of the food that they expect on the shelf. So we feel like we're in a good space to carry on communicating as we do, to really set the realistic expectations and have that impact going forward, that we think will be really valuable. So yeah, I think it wouldn't be a talk without mentioning coronavirus. So finish on that note. But thank you very much for your attention. My email address is on the screen, so if you do have any questions about LEAF or about the work we do, please do feel free to drop me an email.